If you write fan fiction and then publish it, what can happen to you? Someone recently found out when they wrote essentially a fan fiction of Lord of the Rings, and now they are in really big legal trouble. So let's talk to Resort IP and Entertainment lawyer Tony to find out what happened.
My name is Tony Iliakostas. I'm an adjunct professor of entertainment law and IP at New York Law School, and I have an Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok account called The IP Professor that is dedicated to all things intellectual property.
Tony, we recently had somebody create a fan fiction of Lord of the Rings, publish it, and got caught for doing so. So what can happen if we write fan fictions and publish them?
Well, it's probably going to happen the same way that this happened to this gentleman. So first off, we've talked about it before, and you can check out our previous videos about it. But the author in question has the most Greek name ever. It is like the Greek gods had birthed out geometry names. His name is Demetrius Polychron. He created a book series that was based on the Lord of the Rings, the J.R.R. Tolkien book series. So his book was called Fellowship of the King. Obviously, we know the book is called Fellowship of the Ring, but he was basically up in arms and had sued Tolkien Enterprises, the estate, for J.R.R. Tolkien, and Amazon for essentially $250 million, which was the value of a deal between both parties over Rings of Power, which is the Amazon prequel series to the Lord of the Rings films. He alleged that, they ripped off his book, which I think was also Ring of Power or Power Ring, something to that effect. But he's arguing that at one point in 2017, he had sent a copy of his books to J.R.R. Tolkien's estate. They never acknowledged receipt of it. In 2019 or 2020, that's when the deal between Amazon and Tolkien Enterprises took place to develop this Rings of Power series. They developed it, it was released, and he alleges that they used elements from his book to create the book. So just to give you an idea of how ridiculous this claim was, he's alleging that the use of dragons and the use of mythological figures that are in his book are also in Rings of Power, and thus that amounts to copyright infringement, which we've talked about it before. Check out the playlist. Generally speaking, things like dragons and mythological figures that are very much in that medieval lore or fictional lore, that's the kind of thing that's not going to be worthy of copyright protection. It's too generic, too many versions of books out there that it's not exclusive to one party versus another. So all that to say, he was very ambitious in suing Tolkien Enterprises and Amazon for $250 million because Tolkien Enterprises then finally recognized Demetrius Polychron, and oh my God, they realized that he was ripping off entirely all of the Tolkien books from The Hobbit all the way through Lord of the Rings. So they countersued him, and he had faced a judgment just recently in court where the court found that he had actually committed blatant copyright infringement. So now he has to pay up. I'm not aware of the number. I believe it's somewhere around like 20 mil or maybe a little bit more, but it's a pretty high price tag that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, I'm bringing this up because I cannot begin to tell you how many times there are people out there that think that they're inspired by a book or they're inspired by a series, and they'll say, oh, I want to make my own version of it. And look, you can do that for public domain books like Alice in Wonderland, like Winnie the Pooh, now that it's in the public domain. Heck, Steamboat Willie's now in the public domain. They got 2 horror movies coming out. Make a Steamboat Willie book. So go for it. It's all good. At the end of the day, that's fine. But you can't make a book that features Elsa and Anna. You can't make a book that features Ariel, like the version of Ariel from Little Mermaid, Disney's Little Mermaid. You can't make a book that features Buzz Lightyear and Woody as like the center protagonist in a book. You can't make a book that features any other character that is protected under copyright law. That there's just no place for it whatsoever. Why? Because the copyright for those specific characters is still enforceable, is very much alive and well, and is not expiring anytime soon. And the bottom line is there are people that think, oh, well, if I make fan fiction, if I do my own telling of the story featuring the same characters, that's fair use. Fair use this, fair use that. I've said it before and I'll say it again. If I had $1 for every time fair use was used, I would be a millionaire. It is single-handedly the most used and abused term in all of intellectual property law. Everybody screams fair use and they think that it covers their rear end. It does not, ladies and gentlemen. Fair use operates as a defense to copyright infringement so long as you're using someone else's work for criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. Please explain to me, this is a rhetorical question, but please explain to me, where does fan fiction come into criticism, commentary, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research? Spoiler alert, it does not at all. There is no world where it would even satisfy the criticism or commentary prong. Surely not news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research. But bottom line, there is no place for fan fiction to use existing characters that are protected under copyright. So bottom line, if you're going to get into the fan fiction space, think twice. Be wise. How are you going to do a retelling of a story? The story has to feature characters that are very much alive, very much in the public domain. So, like I mentioned before, characters like Winnie the Pooh, now that it's in the public domain, that would be okay. As long as it's not Disney's version of Winnie the Pooh, the A.A. Milne version of Winnie the Pooh is fair game. But you can't make a book featuring the Grinch and the Lorax. Those are very much protected under copyright, and Seuss Enterprises is extremely litigious. You can't make books with Clifford the Big Red Dog, very much protected under copyright law. You can't make books featuring all the Disney characters, past and present, and maybe even future. There's just no place for it whatsoever because those are protected under copyright. And of course, if you have any doubts or any questions, please speak to your publishing lawyer. Please speak to a lawyer that specializes in copyright, so that way you know exactly how your fan fiction is going to work out, if you're doing it ethically, if you're doing it kosher, and if you're not, your lawyer will give you the necessary guidance, especially if your intention is to use characters that are still protected under copyright law. Again, if it's public domain, it's all good, but please, there are too many fan fiction authors that think that a retelling is covered under fair use. That is simply not the case. And wherever they're getting their information, they are severely misinformed, and they need to be, kind of brought to earth and basically read the Riot Act in some way.
And keep in mind, we have a full playlist on how to write retellings. We have a full playlist on the legal side of publishing. We've got a lot of your questions already answered, but if you have questions, feel free to drop it. And keep in mind, if you're writing a fan fiction, that is a lot of hours, a lot of days, a lot of months for some of you. And that's a really big amount in fines that you can be earning for yourself if you move forward with publishing this. So keep that in mind as you are writing, and make sure you do something that's a little bit more on the unique side to keep yourself legally protected. If you've got questions, go ahead and drop those down below. And as always, you can reach out to Tony and his social media. Tony, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at the IP Professor. You can check out my entertainment law podcast called Unseen, with new episodes dropping every Friday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Drop your questions down below and follow along for daily videos helping you navigate the world of publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most profitable and most stress-free year ever.